Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 371, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, May 16th, 2025. Hey everyone, happy Friday to you. If you need some weekend plans, you know exactly what to do. You go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. You can see what's going on this weekend and beyond. Today is an interview episode. It's a good one. We've got two guests, and you'll see why they are together. They have done something pretty incredible together, but in addition to that, amazing careers and background stories on both of them. It's a really great interview. I wish I had more time. Where people's attention spans were longer. Maybe we could have done a couple hours and broken it up because there's just so much we could have talked about. But our focus is on something incredible that they both did, which is that they have conquered all of the world's 7 summits. This is talking about mountaineering, climbing mountains, like the whole thing. You know, when you see documentaries or hearing people scale these incredible mountains around the world, the whole thing, the temperature changes, staying intense. This is, speaking of intense, it's intense. So that's incredible, but there's so much more to it. We learn about why they wanted to, take this on, how they ended up meeting, and they've actually climbed a couple mountains together. But we talk about Mount Everest a lot today for a couple reasons. One of the guests is Cokie Cox. She's a Charleston local. Yes, local. We don't hear that a lot in Charleston. I should say native. We don't hear that a lot in Charleston, and she is one of them. She has a great background. She is an entrepreneur, a financial advisor, an author, a philanthropist, and we touch on those things. And there will be more info in the show notes for both of these folks, because there's just so much we couldn't cover today, so you can go look into those things. But when she decided to scale Mount Everest, she created a campaign that helped benefit the MUSC Hollings Cancer Center. She talks about that. It's called the Everyday Everest campaign. It's incredible what she was able to do. And then her climbing partner is Mark Pattison, a former NFL player who turned into this elite mountaineer. In addition to that, the Mount Everest climb that they were on together was actually turned into like a documentary film by NFL Films. It's called Searching for the Summit. And so they have that tie-in. Mark is working on a book about not just Mount Everest, but this entire journey he has been on. So just an incredible background on both. Again, I could have talked to Cokie about all the other stuff that she's involved in, including she has a goat farm that she mentions here in the podcast. Mark, obviously, we could have talked about his years in the NFL and the fact that he works for Sports Illustrated now, and on and on. Just both super impressive people that I was happy to speak with today and learn more about their story. And again, the only downside is I wish there was some more time. So as you're listening, feel free to, or after, of course, feel free to click on those links in the show notes so you can learn more about what we talk about, but also the stuff that we really weren't able to get to. Just incredible interview today, and I'm sure you all enjoy it. So without any further delay, let's get into it. And joining me now, as promised, we have two guests today. We've got Cokie Cox as well as Mark Pattison. We're going to dive into their backgrounds here. We have all sorts of stuff to discuss today. How are you all doing today?
Doing great, Christian. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course, I'm really excited to learn more about you both, and I know the listeners are going to enjoy this conversation. Before we dive into current projects and things that are going on, can you, each of you, and whoever wants to go first, feel free, just give a little background or a short bio of who you are, just so as we start this conversation, the listeners have a little bit of an idea of who they're listening to, who this person is.
Well, so Mark, you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, all right. Well, so I am a Charleston native. How about that? That you don't hear that every day. Maybe on Holy City Center, maybe on the podcast. But so Charleston native. It's going to be of no surprise once we get later into the Everest story here that I've been a woman in a man's world for, if not all my life, at least the last 30 years in finance. So basically, I've been in consulting, planning, and investments straight out of Clemson. So I'm a Clemson grad. So none of that is sort of earth-shattering. I do think that most Charlestonians, I sort of get a head turn when A, they hear I've summited Everest, and B, they learn that I'm also an aspiring goat farmer with a grade A raw goat dairy out in Awendaw.
Yes, I saw that. And aren't you participating in like goat yoga and all that kind of stuff?
You know what? I got so tired of people asking, "Oh, so do you do goat yoga?" So, yes, the team launched a more expansive version of goat yoga this year. So, yes, we do goat yoga, and it is a blast. But I will say, Bikram is more my style.
Okay. See, I thought I saw the goat yoga thing on one of your websites or social, so I thought so. But yeah, you've got a great, incredible background, all sorts of stuff. We're going to kind of home in on one aspect of that today, but yeah, you've got a lot in your background. You've done a lot of different things, and Mark, you're the same way.
Yeah, a little bit. I grew up on the opposite coast. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. Very athletic up there. Played all the sports as a little kid growing up, and kind of the backdrop. Two things. One, Husky Stadium, the University of Washington, was right out my parents' window. And
Oh
the
wow.
second point, on a clear day, which isn't all that often in Seattle, Washington, but when it does clear, you actually can see Mount Rainier. And Mount Rainier is
Mm,
14,500 feet. It just stands very majestic, kind of in the backdrop, sits right in the middle of the state. But it's very majestic, and a lot of people come from all over the world to train on that particular mountain. It's got some elements of Mount Everest, certainly not the height, but lots of other things, glaciated, and climbed that back in 1998. But did go on to the University of Washington and play football, and that was an amazing moment in my life to be able to be trained by what turned out to be a Hall of Fame coach, Don James. Then went on
mhm.
to play in the NFL. Like Cokie, was able to summit Mount Everest with her, climbed the seven summits, became the first NFL player to do that.
Wow.
NFL Films, which Cokie helped participate in, did a documentary on the Everest climb, and it won an Emmy for Best Picture, which was really cool. And my current role today is an executive for Sports Illustrated. So I still get to be around the sports world, and so blessed to be able to do that. And it's a magazine that back in the day when I was playing about 50 years ago, I was in the magazine numerous times, and so it's cool to be on the other side of the fence now with SI and doing what we do.
That's great. Yeah, there's so much in both of your backgrounds that I could talk to you, about forever. A lot of stuff I'm interested in, but today we're going to focus on just one of those aspects, which essentially is the whole mountaineering thing. That's the big chunk of today's interview. And I guess you both mentioned Mount Everest, and Mark, you talked about how you are the first NFL player to ever do all three, or I'm sorry, all seven summits in the world. Uh, but what got you both into
Does that
mountaineering
make
in the first
me?
place?
Sorry, that was really rude, Christian. But I
No,
just
it's
have to ask:
okay.
does that make me the first goat farmer to summit? I gotta have a first, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, we're
there's
gonna give it to
everyone
you.
wants their firsts, and I got nothing
I would
except
imagine. You don't need to fact check that. That sounds right.
thank you.
No
Okay.
problem. So now you both are firsts, obviously, at this. But how did this journey start? We're talking now on the not the end, obviously, but after you've accomplished, going and actually reaching these summits. How did this start for each of you, and why did you decide to get into it?
Yep, Cokie, go ahead.
Well, I love this story because it's pretty unusual, and when I tell it, it still feels unreal even to me. But back in 2003, I had a business coach who, harangued me into taking an entire day out of my business to go out to Charlestown Landing and sit in a room with 30 strangers and sit down and write what would now be called your perfect day. So fast forward, I didn't offer that in my bio. I actually have authored a book called Perfect Day, which is, basically the process that I have created. That it's a planning process that I take all my clients through. It's a lifestyle forward sort of finance light, if you will, approach to planning. But I got that on this cold day in 2003 when my coach said, "Sit down, you're writing your perfect day." I did. And when I left that afternoon, this girl, me, who had never climbed a mountain in my life, left with words on the page that said I was going to climb the 7 summits of the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I tell it and I still am like, what? Did that really happen? But that really happened. So I actually have the handwritten version of that is published in the book, just for back to fact checking. So that's my story. Is it just literally came out of an exercise um, that was very moving, and so moving that, of course, it inspired me to create a process in my practice, and then later to write a book. And then, sure enough, a lot of the things that I wrote in my perfect day in 2003 have come true. So it's a special thought. It's a special memory.
Definitely. That's amazing. And Mark, what about you? How did you get into this?
Well, before I get into that, I will give Cokie this. This might be a first that, if my memory serves me correctly, Cokie and I we spent a boatload at a time. We originally met on Denali back in 2018, and turned out to be the superstar of the group. But fast forwarding, we did a perfect day, I believe, at Camp Two, which is 21,500 feet. And we were up there for a couple of days laying in this tent. And there's a lot of, go time, and there's a lot of rest time and being in your tent time. And just, it's just Cokie and I and talking about life and the world. And we did a perfect day. So she went and she walked me through it. And we talked about it, and I put it down, and it was great. And the reason why it was great is, like Cokie, and one of the reasons why Cokie, I think, is so accomplished in so many different ways is because we're both process driven. That's really what has got me to these different heights, literally
That's
and
a good point.
figuratively. Yep, all over throughout my career. And so, it just really resonated with me when she was talking about it, and like, what's your process and how do you go through it? And there's some things that I'm trying to work out, and she helped me through that. So for that, I will be eternally grateful for. So thank you for that, Cokie. But answering your question about how I got into it, again, going back to the Great Northwest, I grew up doing just a lot of basic hiking with my dad and all that kind of stuff. When I was a little kid, I actually climbed Mount St. Helens, which is also in this great state of Washington, before it blew its top in 1980. And so that was kind of my first exposure to, putting on crampons and being on a rope and all that kind of stuff and going up. But later in life, after football, and I got married, and like all of us, life happens, and I went through a rough patch in my life in terms of a divorce and the kids involved, and it was just tough. And so, after kind of being stuck for a couple of years, I finally woke up, and I decided I'm going to do something amazing. And so I wanted to put something that we call a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal,
Mm.
out there. And for me, that was, trying to go on this journey of trying to climb the highest mountains in the world. We have a lot of people, not a lot, a handful of mountaineers that came out of the great state of Washington. Lou Whitaker, Jim Whitaker, he was the first American in 1963 to climb Mount Everest. And so I had grown up with mad respect towards those people. And so that was really the impetus to get off my ass and quit feeling sorry, and what am I going to do about it? And that really led me into this amazing journey, like Cokie, that I've been on, throughout these last few years. So that's how I got into it.
And how did you guys first get connected, and then how did that end up leading to you climbing Everest together? Not just doing that, but making it a part of, that you said, the NFL Films documentary.
Well,
I, you know,
I need to
that's a
start
you,
on
Mark.
this. Yeah. I need to
You
start.
gotta tell this one. This is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, because I basically won.
Unfettered, permission granted.
I basically won Cokie in a lottery, which is really what it gets down to,
But be
right?
honest, that's not how you felt in the beginning. That's
No,
not
it
how
was
it
a
started.
disaster. No, it was a disaster. I thought in the beginning, because we were on Denali, and by the way, for context, I'd been on Denali, which is up in Alaska, in 2017, and we were pushed back by minus 90-degree weather. Think
Oh
about
my
that.
gosh.
And the thing about Denali, which is a mother, is that as Cokie would come to know in 2018, we each have to carry these sleds and these backpacks, and it's like 132 pounds. It's not trivial, right? And so carrying these things up is tough work, and it just takes a lot of grit and determination and hauling ass. And when you have the weight on your back in the sled that you're pulling in the snow, certainly take up at least a third or two thirds or whatever your weight is. It takes a lot of muscle to do that. And so we go back down in 2017. I'm like, shit, I got to do this thing again. So we come back, and as we're lining things up, the mountaineer guys were like, okay, Bob and Steve, you guys are friends, so you guys go over there, and so and so and so and so, you go over there, and then there was four of us left standing, three guys and one girl. The one girl is Cokie. And so we decided to draw straws for Cokie, who wasn't actually in this little
Wait,
group.
wait, 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 wait. Let me
Yes.
just tell you how it really went down. The guide looks at all of us. We don't know the guide. We've never climbed with him before. And by the way, also for more context, and I don't say this often, but I'm going to say it. Denali, I thought would be and still is my Everest. I mean, Denali is it being such it's an unsupported peak. So, we don't have Sherpas carrying stuff. It's a tougher climb than Everest in different ways. But that
Sure.
said, there we are, first time embarking on what I know is my Everest, right? And we're on the glacier, and it's go time. And the guide looks at all of us and says, "Okay, show of hands, who has a problem sleeping in the tent with Cokie?" And all of the team raises their hands.
Oh no.
Mark, you might not have raised your hand, but anyway, the story goes from there. Yeah, I think Mark drew the short straw or the long straw, however that goes, and we were partners from there on out.
Yeah, no, it was great. So that's how we met, and we know there's a number of things beyond just compatibility that I discovered with Cokie. One, and this would play out in spades on Mount Everest, is her grit, her determination. She's super just tenacious the way she gets after things.
Oh,
She's
shucks.
no, really. I mean, it's probably saved my life on Mount Everest, and I wasn't. I was feeling it's not as high, but there's just some barometric pressure, that funky things that go on Denali. A lot of people have died up there.
Yeah.
It's right off the Bering Sea, off Alaska there, and Russia's on the other side. And I mean, these strong, nasty, cold, like puffs or whatever you call them of air can come through, and just things can change on a moment. And I think like all of our climbs that we're on together, there were just moments in time where we just one needed the other at the right time, and the other needed the other at the right time, and that's what helped create the magic. And we turned out to be one of the strongest teams on the. Well, I think we were the strongest team for sure.
Well, we
Out
were.
of that
We
group.
got, yeah, I love how that story ended on Denali, how we were the only two given permission to run off the mountain first and ahead
Yeah,
of the rest.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
And Mark, you have we talked about the film, the documentary, but you also
Mhm.
have a book that you're working on, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that and what people can expect from it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a long, winding story, but I think that when you start taking a lot of these shiny things that would appear, at least to me, on paper, like the NFL and major college sports, and Emmy and Sports Illustrated, things like that, they're not just magic. And I think that's what I think Cokie was pointing towards, in what she was talking about, the perfect day and her process. And there is a process. There's a method to the madness, and each one of these things have really been guided by this pyramid of success. And so with the book Finding Your Summit, I think it's very metaphorical in terms of everybody's out there. We all have peaks, we all have valleys. Everybody does, and if you haven't hit something like that, then you will. It's coming.
Mm.
And so I think through storytelling, through some of the peaks I've been on, I devote actually one entire chapter to Cokie, and really the theme about Cokie is support systems that we all need in our lives, and positive
mm,
voices. Um, that
Do I
really
get to
helped
edit that
to.
chapter before you publish?
Well, you could make it sound even better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course I want to.
yeah. So, anyways, it is done. We're trying to work on the marketing end of it, but
Sure.
I'm just it's probably one of the hardest things I've done because I'm not a natural writer, and just trying to sequence your life and what that looks like. Is not the easiest thing, at least for
That
me.
is an Everest, Mark.
Yeah,
It
sure.
Yeah,
That's
is an
another one.
Everest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is. It is
yeah.
for sure.
And speaking of Everest again, Cokie, you did something with that climb called Everyday Everest. It was a campaign that involves the MUSC Hollings Cancer Center here in Charleston. Can you tell me a little bit more about, number one, why you decided to incorporate that into this climb, and also what exactly your goal was, and what did you all end up doing?
Yeah, thank you for that soundbite. I love talking about Everyday Everest because in the end, what I decided in just trying to get present and preparation for the climb wasn't just physical. It was emotional, it was mental, it was financial, it was my estate, it was my children, and also just knowing that if I wasn't going to come back, which is a likelihood,
Mm.
if I wasn't going to come back, I wanted to make sure it was worth it, and that something good was done of that. And so with that, going back to my perfect day story,
Mm-hmm.
um, and my mentor passed away of breast cancer after about a 10-year battle. And I have served MUSC in the realms of serving on the foundation board, and then had recently transitioned to the Hollings Cancer Board. And with that, it just felt like cancer is where I need to be, focusing my efforts philanthropically, time, talents, etc. So I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to leverage the trip. I wanted to leverage the expedition for eyeballs to, hopefully gain awareness for, early detection.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just tell you, it was an interesting day. I mentioned Charlestown Landing earlier, the scene of the crime where I wrote my very first perfect day. When I was supposed to address an audience the first time ever for Hollings to announce that I was going to have this campaign, Everyday Everest, we were going to raise $250,000, which felt ginormous to me. I'd
Yeah, sure.
never taken on anything like that in my life. And as I was driving a literal 10 minutes from my office downtown over to Charlestown Landing, oddly, again, scene of the crime, I get up before I park in my parking spot. It hits me, $250,000 for my life. Like that's just not
Sure.
enough. Like what's that going to do in the realm of cancer research or awareness? Nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, between then and literally getting on stage, I announced I wanted to raise $1 million,
Mm.
and just kind of knowing in the back of my mind, MUSC and Hollings had a mobile health unit,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically almost like a tractor trailer mobile unit with, at the time, it had 2D mammography on it on board, as well as sort of like screening checks and other ways that you could inoculate for HPV, things of this nature. And unfortunately, the mobile health unit was stuck at MUSC because it literally couldn't get on the road because it was broken down.
Mm.
And again, 2D mammography. So the $1 million campaign was one to get the mobile health unit back on the road, get 3D mammography on board. And not only did we do that, so this mobile health unit goes up and down I-26 and in rural areas that don't have access to healthcare, like us fortunate enough to live in Charleston and be privileged enough to have access to healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did we get a new mobile health unit back on the road, we also now have many mobile health units that travel into some of the smaller areas. So, the Everyday Everest campaign was one of, if you catch cancer early, you can save lives. And so it's
Right.
just about awareness and if I may, how that ties into Everest for me and what others listeners may be thinking is like, not everybody has to climb Everest, but everybody has their own Everest. And
Mm-hmm.
some days for me, keeping my mammogram appointment is an Everest, and so it's about making sure you don't put those things to the back of the bus or at the end of the list. It's about men and women alike, moving those screenings to the top of the list and summiting that mountain by not canceling the appointment and doing it and making sure you keep up with your cancer screenings.
And kind of related to what you were just saying, it kind of leads into another question I had for both of you, which is, how do you help your climbing stories and this journey that you've been on, from, hey, this is what I'm going to do to actually accomplishing it? How do you hope it will inspire others, if you hope that at all?
Cokie, go ahead.
I feel like I'm doing all the talking,
You're
but
doing great. I love listening to you.
simply, this is a distracted, terrible world we live in. I don't know if you agree, and I don't want to be
Yeah,
negative,
absolutely.
but it is a world just fraught with distractions and noise. And I think downstream from that comes this place of not being able to be present. And if we're not present, we also don't recognize our mortality. And so climbing in Everest for me, climbing in general is my way to unplug and find my God and dial into God and nature and self and my core. And with that, you also just sort of get a heightened sense of mortality. I mean, stepping off, my children at the time were 15 and 17. And it's horrifying to have to sit down your children and say, okay, here's the estate plan, girls. Do you want the farm? Really? Are you sure you want the farm? Because then and so they had to grow up fast.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm so grateful for that because we've had those hard conversations. And in my career, from a financial planning standpoint, no one ever wants to talk about estate planning. They put it off until they're 60 or 65. But, I'm sorry for the commercial here, but cancer and car wrecks happen. And so, I think the climbing stories, if anything, should I hope to inspire people to find a place, find their jam of how do you get present? How do you escape the noise and embracing mortality? Because we're not always promised tomorrow.
Right, great point. Yeah, and Mark, similar for you, or another aspect of how you hope this inspires others?
Look, I'm not trying to do anything in my life to inspire others, right? If somebody's inspired by the things that I do, then, great for them. But what I found is, going back to ground zero when I was going through my rough patch, and again, we all go through rough patches, but I really found healing. I moved from LA to Sun Valley, Idaho, and I really found healing in the mountains, and really that's what resonated with me. And then, as things evolved, to climb the 7 peaks of the world, originally I thought it was going to be 7 years, but COVID and minus 90-degree weather and everything else, kind of turned that into 10-year project. But, I started to get a little bit of attention because of the NFL, and I was just like, how can I turn this into, something for good, kind of like what Cokie did. And so my daughter in particular has epilepsy. And so I started this thing called Amelia's Everest, and that raised several $100,000, and we did campaigns. And so it was really, turning around and paying it forward on the gifts that I've been able to give athletically, and then the opportunities I've been given in terms of being able to actually go out and it's not trivial to go take this on when you're not being sponsored and you have to fund it yourself. And so, there was no penny that went in my pocket from raising money for Amelia's Ever. It all went to charity, but just that feeling of giving back and helping others. And today my daughter is 100% healed, and that
Amazing.
took 20 plus years to do. And so there's a
Isn't
lot of
that
miracles.
fantastic? Yeah.
A lot of miracles that came out of that.
Amazing. The only downside to these, podcast interviews is we really don't have enough time to dive deep, and you guys both have so many different avenues that I could talk about, but as we're winding down, I say that to ask, number one, is there anything that we didn't get to or just something you were hoping to talk about today? If so, take that time now. And in addition to that, or if you think you're good on that end, you can also let us know where we can find more information about whatever. Feel free to plug anything related to this conversation or not, just anywhere where people can learn more about you guys and your projects.
Yeah, I'll start, Coke, if you don't mind. You can go to markpattisonnfl.com, and the film is there. There's lots of other videos. I do public speaking, things like that. The book will be on there soon. And so, again, if people are stuck, they're trying to get out, and they find an inspiration on anything I've done, then great. And if not, great. Best of luck. And that's it on my side, Cokie.
What would I would leave listeners, and I almost said female listeners, but I mean both. The favorite thing I'm doing right now in my career, in my just daily work, is having conversations about investing in women. I still run a thriving um, investment advisory practice, but I'm in the throes of recruiting female advisors. And that's one way that I'm trying to invest in women. But it really just struck me as we're sitting here having this conversation as to how Mark has really invested in me. So you don't have to be a woman, investing in women. Men can do that too. And he's been doing that with me well ahead of this curve and this movement. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful because, it is all about relationships and the Everest story happened because we had such a great um, success and camaraderie and compatibility on Denali. And when he phoned me up and said, "Look, you want to do Everest?" I never intended to do Everest, but when someone like Mark NFL asks me, "Am I you want to do Everest?" I said, "Hell yeah!" So he invested in me, and it's just fun. It's fun to invest in others, and so um, I guess that's what I would leave people with is just investing in women has been my newest favorite thing as we trod through this thing called work and just emphasizing that your lifestyle is everything and your experiences are everything, and that back to that mortality soundbite, it's just don't put things off to tomorrow. You can have, and that's what I'm trying to encourage female advisors towards is that they're exiting the finance space in droves. They're entering the finance space at the same rate of men, but they're not staying in. And why is that? Well, I want to change that. And if you want to have a full life, it doesn't have to be goats and mountains, but if you want to have a full life and you're like me and you majored in finance so that you wouldn't get screwed, well, you know what? You could have a good career ahead of yourselves. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today. Links will be in the show notes, some that were mentioned, some that weren't, just stuff that we mentioned in conversation if people want to get more info. And I'm sure people will. Thanks so much again for joining me. I really appreciate it hearing this part of your story and taking the time out of your day to do so. Thank you so much.
thank you, Christian.
And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Cokie and Mark for joining me today. What a great story. So incredible. And I'll certainly keep you all posted on anything that they both, do in the future. And again, links in the show notes where you can learn more about each of them. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Have an amazing weekend. I'm already excited to be back with you next week, but let's enjoy the weekend first. And until I return to the microphone next week, good night and good luck.